I guess we'll kick this meeting off. Thank you everyone for coming. My name is Amy Maxner. I'm the Conservation Administrator for the town of North Andover. We have some other staff with us and they'll be moving around. Andrew Shapiro, our Director of Community Development and Assistant Town Manager, and Justine Fox is our Conservation Field Inspector. I'll introduce the consultant team in a minute, but just wanted to welcome everyone and thank you for coming. We are in the trenches of updating our open space and recreation plan, which is a 7-year planning document that helps us look forward, look back, figure out our needs and our wishes and our challenges for open space and our recreation facilities. An important thing about having an updated, approved open space and recreation plan is with the state is that it makes us eligible for obtaining grant funds for open space acquisition and recreation improvements and such. So it's a big carrot to have that in place. We've gone through, the consultant has gone through the initial review of all the planning documents that would help inform this open space and recreation plan. We've done a survey which actually received a lot of feedback. We've had over 700 responses, which is really great in the planning world to get that much participation. So we're really happy about that. So with all of that, our consultant has helped us, review everyone's feedback so that we can start formulating our goals and objectives that really is our forecast of all of what we want to try to do in the next 7 years. So we have that in draft form, and you'll see those on the board all over the place. And we're here to get more feedback from you based on how we've formulated that goals and objectives. So I'm going to hand it over to Krista, and she's with Horsley Witten, and she's got her team with her, and she'll walk us through an initial presentation, and then it's going to be sort of an open house type thing, and you can visit boards and whatever you're drawn to. If it's recreation or open space, you can spend more time on one board or the other and delve into what we're sort of projecting for our goals and objectives. And we'd love to hear from you on you like it, you don't like it, or what are we missing. So thanks for coming, and here's Krista.
Thank you, Amy. My name is Krista Moravec. I'm a planner at Horsley Witten, and as Amy said, we've been working with the town probably since the summer. With me is Darsh and Jonas. They're going to help us out tonight. So I do have a short presentation, and we're recording it this evening. So here we go. So I'm just going to kind of give an overview of how we got here, where we've been, an overview of the draft open space and recreation plan. We'll talk about next steps. We'll do some questions and answers. And then we have sort of an open house style, I guess, for the rest of the evening where, as Amy said, you can look at the material, ask us questions, and the like. So for those, I'm just going to kind of give an intro for those who may not have. We did have a public meeting in September. So for those who couldn't join us, I'll give a little bit of a recap. So when we talk about open space and recreation, so open space can mean different things in different contexts, but for this plan, it is public or private undeveloped land that has some value for conservation or recreation. It might have wildlife habitat, it might have ball fields and those types of things, or recreational, it might have hiking trails and that kind of thing. Recreation, I think, is a little more, I guess, easier to get: parks, ball fields, playgrounds, those kinds of things. So Amy talked a little bit about why the town has an open space and recreation plan. It's really to maintain the benefits of your open space and recreation resources. They have environmental values, they give us clean air, clean water, They have social values. They're places where we can be active and meet our neighbors. So they have a lot of value to the community. So we want to make sure that we maintain that. In the planning world, it's kind of our mantra. We want to know where we are, where we've been, and where we want to go. So it's that planning process. So updating the plan helps us know where we are in that. It helps us understand if we're meeting our needs of the community, are we meeting our objectives? And as Amy said, it helps support funding. Having a current plan keeps the town eligible. So how did we get here? So this is just sort of an outline of how we kind of go through the process of updating. We look at existing plans and studies that are relevant to open space and recreation. So we look at those reports, those inventories that the town has done since the last update. We interview town staff and different stakeholders. For example, we interviewed Friends of North Andover Trails, the Conservation Commission, the Commission on Ability Assistance, so different folks who are in groups that have interest in open space and recreation. In September, we had a workshop here, and we asked, what is the town doing well related to these resources? Where could it be better? And what are some new ideas the town should be thinking about? We also had a follow-up with that with a survey. Amy mentioned we had a decent response. About 700 people responded to that. And since then, we've been drafting the plan. So here we are tonight, and we want to know, are we on the right track? Did we get it right? And from there, we'll distribute the plan for comment, send it to the Division of Conservation Services at the state level. They're the reviewers. They'll give us feedback on it, and hopefully we'll get approval. So I'm just going to do some highlights of the current plan. So there are 7 required pieces. These are just a list of sort of the sort of meat of the plan, so to speak. So there's a community profile, and it has some census and information on, infrastructure, people, demographics, and things like that. There's environmental resource inventory. So as an example, there's up front here, there's a water resources map. So looking at the environmental resources that are in town. We also have an open space and recreation resource inventory that we do, and I will touch on that a little bit more. And then there's an analysis of needs, and this is needs related for the community, resource protection needs, and then also needs related to management. So the town's needs in order to manage and sustain these resources. We have goals and objectives, and then there's a 7-year action plan. And that action plan also includes time frame. So it's 7 years, so we want to prioritize actions, when they're going to happen, who's responsible, who's going to help lead that action. And where we can, if needed, we try to identify a potential funding source to implement that action. So I just want to touch base on the inventory. So when we look at the inventory, we're looking at town land. We're also looking at state land, nonprofit land, private land in the sense where it contributes to open space and recreational resources. So this might be conservation restrictions, Chapter 61. So that's a program, a tax program where different uses, a particular use of a property can get a reduction in their taxes, and that would be for agricultural uses, forestry, recreational uses, and open space. So that's a specific program that property owners will enroll in, and they need to maintain that use. So those are important lands related to open space and recreation. And then the nonprofits, there are several in town that hold land, so those are important pieces that we also want to take inventory. There is, rather than projecting it up on the screen, we do have a map up here, a draft of that identifies all of those different properties. Please feel free to come in when we take a break to take a look at it. The town's very rich in a lot of these resources, so it's good to kind of get a sense of what's in town, so you can come and take a look up at that map. So analysis of needs. So this was based on all of the interviews I talked about, our workshop, the survey. We also have a working group that's helping us lead this effort, and that's made consists of town staff from the different departments. So some of the, so like I said, yep. So on the left are sort of what I just listed, but there's also several studies and plans in town that are related to open space and recreation. So there's the town master plan, hazard mitigation plan, which relates to dealing with storms and different events like that. The town's natural resources are sort of your first line of defense. So it has relevancy here. So there's an athletic fields master plan. So the town's been doing work. So we want to make sure that we take that into consideration when we update the plan. So this just summarizes just some of the community needs that we heard. I also have a board over here if you want to take some time with that too, and you can provide us feedback. But generally around open space needs, we found that there's a lot of folks that don't realize how many opportunities there are out in town for trails and conservation. And there's a desire to continue to build that trail network. Related to recreation, we heard that there's a need for more facilities and programming for adults ages 30 to 65. So there's programming for youth and younger and children, programming for seniors, but it's that middle group of adults that they're looking for more programming and facilities. And also there's a desire to have better maintenance and upkeep of the town's recreational athletic fields. The town does have their master plan now, which will hopefully, as they implement that, they'll address some of those issues. But there was, in the feedback we got, there's a desire for more and better maintenance and upkeep and management. Environmental justice. So environmental justice might not be a term you're familiar with. So when we think about environmental justice, these are typically populations in our community that have sort of bared the burden of environmental bads over, land use decisions have pretty much that they have, sorry, losing my train of thought. Ultimately, it's everyone has the ability to experience the environment, have a healthy environment, and have access to resources. And there have been portions of our community that have disproportionately been negatively impacted by our environment or may not have been have access to these resources. So when we look at environmental justice, we want to make sure that we're addressing those discrepancies, making sure that those folks have access. So we want to look at those populations in North Andover and make sure that we're looking at the distribution of resources and access to them. Typically, these are our minority populations, populations of lower income, so we want to take a special note of those to make sure that we're offering access for them. And we do have a map so that identifying those environmental justice areas are done with census data and by census tract. So we have a map up here where you can see where those neighborhoods are, and so when we look at needs, we are looking at targeting those neighborhoods, those that lack recreational facilities and the like. And accessibility. So this is thinking about people with disabilities, so ADA compliance, but also thinking about the term universal design, which is, I guess, sort of a term of art, but thinking about inclusive parks, people who have different abilities, how do we make our parks more accessible to them that may not be a structural improvement like ADA? So are we thinking about people with different cognitive abilities and those types of things? So thinking the needs of those and how can we increase opportunities in town? So resource protection needs, this is our natural environment. So water quality is a big need for the town, and just making sure that stormwater runoff and the pollution that it may bring into the town's water resources. Lake Chuckawick, I was close. I know, it's a tongue twister. You can tell I'm not from town. And Stevens Pond are important resources for the town. Water quality is important, so they're on an important need. Landscapes, habitat, and wildlife corridors. So this is another, agricultural land, protecting those views, protecting those activities was an important need. And then when we think about wildlife corridors, so wildlife can move through the environment around our developed areas, so creating those corridors. But that also may provide opportunities for trails as well, but so building those links between important habitat. And trees and forestry. So I know the town is undertaking a tree inventory this summer, public tree inventory. So that just builds more support for managing trees. Trees are an important resource for a lot of reasons. They absorb floodwater, they cool our air. So taking an inventory and understanding the management needs of that resource is something that the town has highlighted as a need. And so protecting those existing trees that are important and increasing the overall tree canopy, so trying to address that. And finally, management needs. So for town conservation areas, there's really a need for a strategy to sort of do larger management of all of these spaces that the town has jurisdiction over. So what kind of strategy is that, and how do we think about that? For recreation areas, it's implementing the athletic field master plan and trying to maintain staffing as program increases. Communication and engagement. We found that was really a big need to better communicate about the opportunities in town, but also the status of projects that the town has undertaken. We heard that at the workshop, so that was a big need. And environmental stewardship, so promoting our conservation areas, stewardship of those places, but also how can you do that on your own property, in your own home. And then finally, resilience to climate change and natural hazards. So when we, as I mentioned, our natural areas are sort of our first line of defense against these potential impacts from big storms, lots of flooding, the heat, potentially increasing heat. So we want to maintain our natural resources in order to be more resilient to these changes. So the town has a hazard mitigation plan that helps. It touches on open space and natural resources, so it's a good link for the open space and recreation plan. MVP is one of those acronyms, so it's municipal vulnerability preparedness. So what are the town went through a process, I think, in 2021, just trying to understand what are the biggest risks for it when it comes to natural hazards, storms and flooding and whatnot. So the idea is to, continue to build the effort from that to continue to identify where we can maintain and enhance our open spaces, very much linked to the open space and recreation plan. So those are some of the outcomes that came out of that MVP process. And by continuing to move towards that, the town does remain eligible for funding associated with building resilience. All right, so next, Amy talked about goals and objectives. So we have a draft plan. So after all that input, we put together a draft plan. In this 7-year action plan, I had mentioned that, there's no one entity that moves it forward. So the town has a lot of key players, either in town staff committees, but also its regional and community partners. So all these folks help move this plan forward. So just recognizing that. So the draft action plan itself is organized around 4 goals. So our first goal is about implementing the plan and making sure it's consistent with town efforts already in place, plans, policies, and regulations. Second goal is about protecting the town's natural resources and its open spaces, and the list here, habitat, water quality, and building climate resilience. Goal 3 is around providing opportunities to be active for all residents, so with that accessibility and inclusiveness. And goal 4 is about building capacity on the town level in order to sustain these resources, properly manage them. So I'm just going to walk briefly through each of these and just highlight some of the actions that we're thinking about. And then at the end of the evening, more detail is in the boards around the room, and you can have an opportunity to dive deeper into them. But I'm just going to give everyone sort of an overview of what you will see. So related to implementing the open space and rec plan in conjunction with other town plans, policies, and regulations, So the first is evaluating the need for an open space committee, an entity to take responsibility for the open space and recreation plan, ensuring that you secure funding every 7 years to update the plan to make sure it's current, and working with other town boards and commissions to make sure that the goals and objectives of the open space and recreation plan are being met, that there's collaboration, that we're all working together towards the same endpoint. So around protecting the natural environment and open spaces, there's the Lake Sea Master Plan was recently updated, and that is a key to protecting water quality. It does include continuing to protect and acquire properties around the lake, so continuing to move that plan forward. Continuing to enroll properties in that Chapter 61 program. They're not always protected, but they have an opportunity to maintain their views and their functions. For example, if agriculture, promoting environmental stewardship, completing the tree inventory and developing that management plan. And here's that term, nature-based solutions to address climate change. So that's using your natural areas to absorb flooding, reduce that heat island. So that's that key term that gets used. Number 3, about providing all residents with opportunities to be active and enjoy nature. So continue to implement that athletic field master plan. There was a big need to try to find opportunities to make more accessible trails for people with different abilities. Where are those opportunities in town? The Council on Aging is undertaking an North Andover age-friendly initiative. So this is older residents, addresses all quality of life issues, but outdoor recreation is a piece of that. And so supporting that initiative. Making sure that the distribution of open space and recreation is distributed among the town, and particularly looking at underserved or environmental justice neighborhoods and what kind of resources are there. Could there be more? What is the quality of them and what is the need there? So continuing to build that. And finally, continuing to expand the trail and walking network townwide. And finally, building local capacity to continue to protect, plan, and sustain these resources. So developing that management plan, that strategy that's going to help guide the town's conservation land and provide stewardship. There's a need to look at the 400 Great Road property and its reuse, ensuring you're balancing water quality with public access. And then another action in this goal is helping prioritize lands that are there, that are of interest for conservation or have recreational value. So developing some criteria that will help the town prioritize what types of properties, and then also what properties would meet that criteria. So that was a lot. I was just talked a whole lot. I think the purpose of tonight is to give you, it's a lot of material, and so that's why we kind of set up like an open house, to give you a sense, give you the option to really, if you're really interested in one particular area, you can go and focus in on that area and spend some time with it. So we've set it up like an open house. So we have boards in the back of the room, and each one will have a sheet that looks like that, and we have 3 dots. Green is you agree, you like this idea, you agree with this action. Yellow is, I like this, but it needs some changes, or perhaps you need more information. And a red dot is you really don't think it's a good idea. And we really want to know why. So it's one thing to tell us, this could be better, or this isn't a good idea, but we really need to understand why, so we can go back and make some changes and to rethink it. So this is the opportunity for you to let us know if we're on the right track, going in the right direction. So that we're hoping that you can do that, and you can speak to Darsh, myself, or Jonas, or you can fill out an index card. We have a fishbowl. You can drop it in the fishbowl, or you could hand it to one of us, and we'll collect all those at the end of the night. You can also tell us what's missing. I'm sure there's something missing. We want you to tell us. So that's really the crux of this evening. We also have this information on a survey. So if you need more time, you can take it. There are little business cards with this QR code and the website. Someone couldn't make it tonight, you can bring them a card and they can fill it out. Or if you wanted to fill it out tonight because you feel like you want to type it more than write it, that's totally fine too. I'm also happy to write a card for you as well. So that's really the end. Just a quick note about what our next steps are, and then I'll take some questions. So we will incorporate all your comments and work through this document again. We need to develop a schedule for the plan. So as I mentioned, we also, this action plan also includes who's responsible, what's the time frame. So that's our next step, is to sort of organize it and put those details in. And then we collect what's called letters of support. So part of our submission to the Division of Conservation Services is to get letters of support from the planning board, the regional planning agency, select board, and any other committee or commission that would like to provide that. So that's our next step, and then we'll submit it to DCS for review. Thank you. Questions? I know, that was a lot. I know. Gonna take a breath. Yes, ma'am.
I don't know if it's a question or a comment, but one of the things that we were talking about, one of the goals, I think, is communication among the different boards, as far as, is that right?
Right. So I'm just going to repeat your question for you for the folks at home. So your comment was, the goal was to have more communication between the boards. You're thinking. It is kind of, you're asking me, is that what we're thinking about?
Well, what I wanted to add on to it was the communication among direct abutters.
Oh, direct abutters.
So, and I guess my point being that, we're going to be focusing in on communicating among the boards in the town, but I'd love to see if we can infuse a very important component of that, which is when there's a project, a major project. If you're taking a picture of me, I'm going to take my glasses.
So if there's a major project, yes.
Any major project, I think that it is incumbent upon all of us to maybe learn from all our errors, that before a project goes forward with significant planning and design, that we really, really need to take into account the impact that it's going to be making on direct abutters, so that it can be done in a way that melds in well with the community and doesn't have an adverse impact to the direct abutters. I think it is something that we need to infuse in our goals. That was one comment, maybe.
No, that's great. I appreciate that. So having more, and that is for any project, or, I mean, we're talking about recreation and open space, but that can apply to that, or just in general, any sort of effort that is happening in town.
That during the design.
During the design, to have more engagement with abutters and the community at large as well.
Sure. Yeah,
Thank you, and Andrew has a mic.
I do have a mic. So, yeah, and this is for the folks at home. So that, yeah, folks at home.
Then I don't have to paraphrase, and you can say exactly what you want to say.
Yeah. So folks at home, did you hear that? I guess the other thing is, there is a little bit of an elephant in the room with the PFAS that has been emerging, and that concern as it impacts our environment, and environmental justice. We're talking about, an undue burden on different communities. And although North Andover is not an environmental justice community, I think that our water system impacts all of us, and the Merrimack Valley in particular, and that we really need to be very, very concerned about the PFAS issue. and how it impacts not only our community, but some of the overburdened communities such as Lawrence and Haverhill.
Thank you for that. Yes, and that is something, we don't have anything specific, but definitely that goes on a card for sure. And I know, North Andover has, I'm going to slowly go this way. So there are sort of more in the more denser parts of town, some tracks that are identified as environmental justice, and either they have minority populations, either 40% or more of that census tract has identified as that, or their income meets a threshold, or both. So there are some populations locally to consider when you're thinking about that and other sort of environmental issues that are out there.
And again, it's not just,
Yep. Yeah, and it's not just environmental.
Once again, the folks at home. So I guess environmental justice areas are very important, but I'm talking also about our own community and
Absolutely, absolutely. And I totally, yeah, it's water quality for everyone. And PFAS is a very important issue for us to address. Thank you.
You talked about opening, helping to implement the field plan for the athletic department and things like that. What kind of governance does this group have on how the money that might be used for those projects is used? And what, do you have any decision-making capabilities, or is that decided even before you give the money, or how does that work?
So Andrew's going to help me answer that one.
I'll try to
Thank
answer
you.
that. Yeah, so I think, we're a little unique in North Andover in that we have an athletic fields master plan. I don't think that a lot of communities have that. So typically, that sort of planning would actually be done within this type of process, within an open space and recreation plan as a subset of that. So in some respects, we're sort of, duplicating efforts or just sort of reinforcing the work that the athletic fields master plan did. What this plan will enable us to do is seek grant funding. Usually it's up to like $500,000, right, for a park grant, for instance?
I think, yes. I don't know the exact amount, but
Okay.
But having this plan current, the town is eligible for that fund. And I'll let you finish.
Well, and I was just going to say that, as far as the governance process, I think right now it's kind of a mixture. So we have a fields committee, we have a youth and recreation committee, we have the select board, and then we have town management. And I think between all parties, we have to decide what the priorities are. So obviously we have the athletic fields master plan. So things that are already sort of staked out in those planning documents, we want to, if there's funding available at the state level to pursue for recreation purposes, capital projects for recreation, we will probably look to that plan to decide what we want to support. But again, it's difficult to get if you're thinking, for instance, about the recreation complex, there's millions of dollars, upwards of $10 million that we need to secure in order to do that project. And the more likely scenario is we're still going to have to go to town meeting in some form or fashion to get approval from the entire town to get the funding to do that.
The root of the question was, I guess, where I was coming from was that I think it was like $5 million that was coming from Community Preservation Act funds that was going to go toward that project. How much control do you have over deciding how that gets spent, and what role does it have in the AstroTurf or whatever else is of concern to the community about having it be actual conservation as opposed to just plastic on the ground?
Yeah, again, I think, CPC is another great example. I mean, that's funding that has to get past the town meeting as well. So it goes typically, when a project goes before the CPA or the CPC, excuse me, for CPA funding, there are meetings, there are public meetings. People can come out and make comments on the various plans. The CPC members themselves get to ask questions and make comments. And so before you even get to the point where it's coming before town meeting, there's been sort of a vetting process, so to speak. And people can also ask the question, why are we going to spend on that versus an open space acquisition, or why are we spending on this particular athletic field project versus that athletic field project? So those questions can certainly be vetted, and those checks and balances are in place during those public meetings, I would say.
This is like a planning document, so to speak, so it's helping to set the stage to pursue those more detailed, specific actions. So we cite a lot of existing plans that are already going on in town that will have more detail, like the athletic master plan is more detail. This is a sort of a parallel document, it's maybe an umbrella, but it's sort of, they're all supposed, that's sort of the thinking between collaborating between all the, so we're all sort of, everyone's on the same page. And so keeping this plan current, it's updated every 7 years. So you have, there's some future aspect, but 7 years isn't a really long time. So you do have an opportunity to be somewhat specific, but you also want to be flexible. So trying to walk that fine line. But if there are things that need to get done, we want to sort of talk about them in the plan too.
Very much. Thank you. My name is Melinda Perone. I live over in, I live in the environmental justice community, actually. And I wanted to say that Amy and Justine work so hard to keep our streams and Lake Chickawick clean and beautiful. One thing I wanted to ask was, there is a study that's coming, that has been approved, an award, about the Sutton Pond Dam and possible removal of that dam. So there's a study. What part of the town submitted or requested that grant? And then I have a further question with regards to that.
So my department, so I actually submitted that grant. The reason we submitted a grant to look at that was, as many know, we're vulnerable to inland flooding, riverine flooding, basically because of the Cochicwick Brook or the Cochicwick River that runs down from the lake all the way down to the Merrimack River. And in between there are a series of ponds that are basically impounded. And there's a vulnerability inherent with that because when you have a heavy rain event or a couple of heavy rain events like we did last summer, and you have overflowing as a result of that, it leads to flooding. So we wanted to take a look at whether it made sense from a feasibility standpoint and what it would take to remove the impoundment at Sutton Pond in particular, because it's right next to Sutton Street, which is a vital corridor in and out of town and through town. And you have a lot of businesses right there, and you do have some residential areas that rely on that area. So we enlisted DER, the Division of Ecological Resources. They're looking at it from a resource conservation standpoint in terms of like migratory fish and things like that. But generally speaking, the state is looking at ways to incentivize the removal of as many impoundments as possible so that we can bring it back to more of a natural riverine environment as opposed to like a dammed up series of ponds that, make us more vulnerable to inland flooding.
So that leads into my next question. So my next question basically was, if that was to happen, would that not be open space? And I actually went down to see that area, and I was stunned by the appearance of that area. And I know that next to it is a large space, quite a large space that's just covered with concrete. So when we look at that area and then versus the area it comes from, absolutely beautiful Lake Cochicwick, is there any way that we can consider making some open space there as that river recovers, or Lake Cochicwick and Cochicwick Brook?
In short, yes. I think, I would just say for those who have seen over the years, we've done a lot of planning in particular to do, and we talked, Chris referenced it before, we're trying to provide more access, universal access for anybody to access trails and recreational areas. And one of the things we've been trying to do and plan for is a shared use path that would run from Main Street to High Street over Sutton Pond, kind of at the rear of Clean Harbors, to the rear of where Avalon is now, coming all the way to High Street. And that would be in the form of like a 8 to 10 foot wide, pathway that's paved, which provides, universal access. And so, yes, we envision that area being a place of, it could be an open space, it can be a recreational area, it can be a place to be viewed and experienced. Right now, it's kind of shut off. People don't go back there and they can't really access it. So we do want to be able to provide access to those areas. I think that's part of North Andover's natural beauty is not only the obvious places like Lake Ochiquik and Wire Hill, it's the places we don't yet see that are maybe closer to Main Street, closer to Sutton Street, closer to some of our urbanized environments that you don't always think about or immediately leap to. So we want to provide access to that. And yes, to answer your question, there is an opportunity to provide open space there, especially if the resource area changes back to more of a natural riverine environment. Absolutely.
Great questions.
I was wondering, are there any restrictions on these funds towards whether they could be used for hiring more personnel, like more DPW workers? And the reason I ask that question is, I think when we talk about fields, playing fields, there's this thought that, well, if you put in artificial turf, you don't have to maintain it because we don't have the workers to maintain fields. But if we had the workers, if we were able to fund, 2 or 3 positions that were pretty much devoted to field maintenance, is that a possibility for these state funds?
So just to backtrack, so this plan, so you're talking about so there's the grants that this plan would have the town be eligible for. They typically don't support staff salaries and things like that I'm aware of. That would probably have to be from the town funds for that, and that goes through town meeting and budgeting and all of that. But I mean, it is a need. If we document a need, we didn't talk about staffing for maintenance, but staffing for program. But clearly, if you are going to increase resources, you sort of have to build your capacity to maintain those resources, regardless of if it's athletic fields or parks. But it is a valid point and something to think about as we sort of organize ourselves in implementation and set expectations as well. It's a great point.
You're going to kill me for doing this, but I'm going to go back to the abutters input.
Yes,
I just
yep.
want to make sure that it's clear, and clearly it's a little bone of a contention, and I
That's
don't want to
okay.
get you in the middle of it. But it's something where things were done with all the best of intentions. But when I say that the abutters should be included during the design phase, I mean, if there is a committee, which obviously there is or will be for any major project, that there be significant representation on that design committee from direct abutters and the direct neighbors who are going to be impacted. And not just public hearings where people are running after the public hearings and looking for them, but really having a little bit of teeth to their suggestions. And again, I know that everything was done with the very best of intentions, but it wound up being kind of a mess. And we don't have, for example, with the Recplex, a sports field that we could have had years ago because we didn't do that. So just thought I'd say it. Sorry
Thank you.
for you to get in the middle of it. But
No, that's fine. We'll take note and pass it to as we need to. Yep, Andrew's here. Thank you. We can let you all start. I'm here to answer questions. We're all here to continue to answer questions one-on-one. Happy to do that. But I want to give you an opportunity. Oh, yes. Okay.
I got here a little early and I went all around and read everything, and it's almost motherhood and apple pie. Of course we want to try to do this. So I got 2 questions. One question is, I know it's a 7-year plan and it's step by step. Do you have the staff and the potential resources to try to implement a lot of it, not all of it?
And that is a key thing that we're going to have to wrestle with our group, with the town when we go back to this plan. That's key. That we want to make a doable action plan. We're going to have to think about it. And sometimes you can, we can do things incrementally. Maybe there's, how can we make small steps towards progress? I think that's a key. So these might be, maybe there's an opportunity to break some of these actions down. Staff is always important. I know, like you said, Amy and Justine do a lot. And, I think that was sort of the impetus of the, a strategy or some sort of management approach to the conservation lands. This just as an example. So how do we build up to that? So that is one big thing, but I think maybe we need to make some smaller steps. And maybe we won't accomplish it in 7 years. I think that's okay if we feel like some of these things aren't going to be done in 7 years. I think we need to talk about them and put them out there and sort of work through them. I think that I think that's an important thing. Andrew's got something to add.
I was just going to add, I'm a little biased because obviously I work for the town. But one of my roles is I work through the master plan, which is sort of more of an overarching document that touches a lot of areas, not only open space and recreation plan, but many things. And if objectively, and John's back here, John Strauss, he's the chair of the master plan implementation committee. You ask him or me or anybody else on the master plan implementation committee or some folks on the select board, if you take a look at the master plan and the strategies within there, we have accomplished addressed the vast majority of strategies that are in that plan with the staff we have on. And has every project been done perfectly? Have we done everything in the plan? No. Is there more to be done? There's always more to be done. Can we improve? Absolutely. But I'm just pointing that out because I think that the town does a pretty good job of punching above its weight in terms of the resources that we have available to us and the effort we put into implementing the plans that we develop with public input. And I think we will do that with this plan as well. And just like Krista said, we may not get to everything. Everything may not be done 100%, but I think it's going to be a good, solid plan to work from, and we'll continue to build off of it when we do this in 7 years as well. And what we end up not addressing, how can we address that?
I think when we start an update to an open space and recreation plan, we look at what you said you were going to do. Like we kind of do what we call an audit, and we say, okay, why didn't this get done? Sometimes funding goes away. Staff change, there are a lot of reasons, but then you did something that you didn't have on the list. Like things happen all the time, opportunities come up. So I think doing that audit every time you're updating your plan gives you that sort of reality check, and go ahead.
My
Yes.
second question is, we're protecting the environment, protecting the green space. We want to do all these things, and yet in the plan is supporting a regplex and also fields that want to put a whole lot of plastic on the ground that pollutes, towers of light, that is light pollution, and I'd say pickleball courts are noise pollution, but that's a whole fight of its own. But it just seems that if we're talking about the environment and everything, we should be looking at natural surfaces and natural, I'm not saying it right, but grass. Mm-hmm. And have the maintenance to support these, not just the grass there, but the grass and the other things and on the trails and everything else. We need certainly a lot more maintenance, but the artificial turf fields, not only at the middle school fields, but it's in that plan, all sorts of other fields and more additional at the high school. It just seems like we're going to be acres of plastic in North Andover.
That's the decisions that get made when the design happens. I don't, that's not, if that's the sentiment of the community of the town, that's, the direction we'll go in the plan, but.
Yeah, I'll just quickly respond.
She wants that mic back.
Before I give it back, Diane, hold on. Excuse me. So I wasn't here when the Recplex was designed, so I don't know all the decision making that went into it, but here's what I know. Again, anything that the town does in terms of funding the Recplex, it's going to have to go through town meeting again. There's going to be checks and balances. There's going to be discussions at board meetings. There's going to have to be, again, vetting it through various channels. The other aspect of it is it healthy or not? I'm not a scientist. I'm not an expert on, turf fields. I'm really not. But I know the health department looked at it. Regardless of what we end up doing, I think, there are things that are going to be done in town that run counter to the idea of, environmentalism. That's just the way it is. When you pave a street, when you pave a parking lot, you're creating impervious surfaces. That runs counter to all the things we're talking about in this plan. But what we do want to do is make sure that the valued resource areas that we have in town, we take care of, we increase, we protect our drinking water supply, we try to, improve the natural environments that we have as best we can. And it doesn't mean that there aren't going to be projects that run counter to that in some respect. Yeah, there's a balance.
It's a balance. It's a balance. This is an open space and recreation plan, so it's outdoor recreation spaces. So developed facilities are part of the plan, and I hear you. I understand what you're saying, but we do need a balance between recreation facilities.
Again,
but how they get designed and implemented is where you can sort of meet that challenge.
Thank you, Andrew. Thank you, Christine. My name is Wayne Gendron, Berkeley Road, 40-year resident. My question, first of all, I didn't know anything about a master plan for fields or anything like that. 40-year resident doesn't mean I'm plugged in. But I did get involved once I heard about the Recplex, and I was concerned about the artificial turf there. And from what I understand from just listening tonight, are we talking about artificial turf on additional fields in North Andover? Is that part of the existing master plan?
We're not talking about that's not part of this plan. So this is more high level. There is an athletics fields master plan, and that has its own strategies and recommendations, and we were referencing it. So this is more of a higher level document that touches on different open space and recreational resources, just more of a sort of maybe one level up from there to sort of help implement it. So we're not making any decisions about turf tonight.
Let me just be clear. So no. To answer your question in plain English, no. What we're saying is there's needs for athletic facilities and recreation facilities, and we want to find ways to put that into practice. Whether those facilities end up being natural grass, whether they end up being artificial turf or some other surface, those are decisions that are made when those projects are in design, not by this plan. And let me also just be very clear. This plan, we're not trying to relitigate the recreation complex of this plan. We're not. That is something completely different than what we're doing in this plan. This is talking about the needs of the town from an open space perspective and a recreation perspective, not whether or not the Recplex is a good idea or how it should be implemented. I just want to be very clear about that because I think that's getting lost in translation. Did you have a follow-up?
Yeah.
Okay.
My question is, when this master plan for the rec fields was devised or designed or conceived, were alternatives considered in that master plan? Does anybody here know?
I don't off the top of my head know. I wasn't part of that master planning process. And again, this is a document that's wholly separate from the athletics fields master plan. I mean, it takes those conclusions into consideration, and as Krista said, her team looked at the plan when we were developing this plan, but I can't speak specifically to issues in that plan.
I hope this will make your job easier, I hope. So the purpose of tonight's discussion, as I understand it, is to create kind of just a goals and objectives document that will allow the town to get potential grants from the state and prove we've thought some of this stuff out. But this document does not have any impact on the decision-making around the Recplex or athletic fields or anything like that. It just says, yeah, we know there are these areas that we think should be part of the development process. Then there are a whole bunch of other committees that come together and say, this is how that's going to get designed. Then it all goes to town meeting, et cetera. But this document is not going to have anything to do with any of that. Correct? Okay.
That's a good summary. Yeah.
But your boards.
But we are
boards
trying to
supporting
be.
it.
The town has not made a decision to cancel the Recplex. Okay, so there may be there might be a draft strategy on the plan that addresses the Recplex in some respect that says the town should, and Fields.
So
Yeah,
there's a
but
need.
we have to go through a process to figure out what the end result of it is. You know, the Recplex, when we say Recplex, it may not be the town is going to move forward with the implementation of the Recplex as it's currently designed and planned. It could be to do the Recplex exactly as it's planned, maybe to make it natural grass, like a lot of people in here are, you know, voicing that concern. I don't know what the end result's going to be, but this plan is not going to be the end all be all of whether or not we do the Recplex. I can assure you that.
From what I'm hearing, I'm not hearing people say they don't want a red flag. From what I'm understanding, no, go ahead, what are you hearing? No, not at all, not at all. Please understand that, not at all. I mean, we all voted for it, but I guess what at least I'm hearing, and it could be not the same
The
thing.
details aren't here.
Yeah, exactly.
The details of the plan, of the Recplex,
Yeah.
however it may play out, are not
Yeah.
in this plan. There is a
Yeah.
need for recreational facilities. That's one solution that is being considered by the town, so we want to help. If that's, you know, we hear that there is support for it. How it gets implemented and designed is to be determined in a more complex process with town meeting and public meetings and all of that. So this touches on a lot of other issues. And I know we've mentioned the athletic fields master plan. You know, that was a document that the town is using to assess the quality of its fields and where needs are met to maintain them, upgrade them. They clearly have a high demand for fields that they can't meet, so they're trying to use that as a tool to meet the high demand for fields for different athletic sports. That was done in 2021, so that's where that document comes from. I know you were asking about that.
So if I could just interpret what I think that people are saying, right, it is that people want sports fields, and we also want the goal of protecting our environment. But whenever there is an alternative for creating sports fields that are safe and protect our environment, and that we have natural fields, that we should be able to look at the safe, natural alternative. Again, I'm going to say it for the 100th time, is anybody here not wanting a sports complex? But everybody does, and they want to uphold the goal of protecting the environment, having natural sports fields and natural open space when there is that opportunity. As far as like roads, you know, we do have to pave our roads. We're not going to go back to, right? But in this case, there is that opportunity to reach both goals. So I'm going to hand this over.
Thank you.
Because I know
Thank
I've
you for
taken too
that.
much time.
Thank you. Yep, thank you.
John, did you have something you want to say? Do we still have time for questions here? I know we're rolling along here.
No, that's fine. I mean, I'm
Okay.
happy to do it. I just want to give folks, opportunity to go through materials too.
So I think it's important, just to make it simple for an explanation. These plans are roadmaps. The plan we're looking at tonight, consider it an interstate roadmap. It's going to get you the general area. It's not going to get you the off-ramp. It's not going to get you on your local roads. It's going to get you to your general region. That's what this exercise is about doing. So very high-level stuff. That's, once this gets in place, then you focus on the lower-level stuff and you get into the specifics. But that's down the path. That's, again, down the road. So that what needs to be accomplished here is to look at it at a very high-level regard. Do you agree? Do you disagree with these general ideas? Don't get bogged down in the specifics, because if you get bogged down in the specifics on this stuff, nothing gets done. So that's the importance of this exercise here, is to look at it big picture, do you kind of agree with the direction that we're looking at for a 7-year plan right now? I just want to, I think it's important to emphasize that point. It's very high-level stuff. Don't get caught. I'm not saying that details are not important in any way, shape, or form, but don't let the details hold you up from looking at whether the overall concept is something worth pursuing.
So with that in mind, my question is, does the town look at those properties that are within the borders of the town that are not being used to their extent? So Homegrown Lacrosse is, I think, the property is either for lease or for sale. As I was saying, that Safe Harbors down here is acres. I think it's 7 or 8 acres of cement. So that's impervious, surface. Could those possible to be converted to open space or to fields? We live on on 2 watersheds. I live up on Ipswich watershed, and then there's also the Merrimack watershed. So to find flat spaces for a field, these are opportunities. Up near Jefferson Office Park, there's a plat of impervious substance. I've been wanting to ask, why is there a huge paved path up there above the park itself, where there's just a plow sitting up there? So, and that's a beautiful place to watch the sunset, and to look over. Yeah. There's not that many cars in that parking lot. If you look at the North Andover Business Park, which is behind Stop and Shop, there's acres of parking spaces that aren't used there, so that's impervious. And then the other question is Stop and Shop. I'm not sure what's going to happen with our Stop and Shop, and we should be sad if it left. But does the town have the opportunity to look for those pieces of property and use that big, huge, flat piece of property if it comes up on the?
Yeah, I mean, I think, what this plan does is look at certain areas and, tells us to prioritize what we should be considering when we acquire open space and new properties. Watershed protection, recreation opportunities, connections to different existing trail networks, those are definitely our priorities. With respect to some of the properties you just said, it's what we said before, there's a balancing act that has to be struck. So Stop and Shop, I don't know what happens to Stop and by the way, that's just a rumor, by the way. No one knows whether Stop and Shop is going. I don't want to fuel the fire there, but because I honestly don't know if they're leaving or if they're staying. But the point is, let's just say, argument's sake, they do leave. That's a commercial property with, that contributes to the town's bottom line. So we have to consider those issues as well. If the town acquires a property that's a productive commercial property, and then we take it off the tax rolls, that there's other implications there. It's not to say that it's not the right thing to do in some certain circumstances, but it's something that they consider. And same thing with parking areas. I mean, I don't like paved surface parking just as much as the next person. I would love to see it reduced, but a lot of these properties have requirements through their permits to provide a certain amount of parking for the uses they provide. So there's other implications. So again, it's just a balancing act, but we're definitely through this plan looking at what should our priorities be with respect to acquiring new open space properties.
I was just going to reinforce that last statement that you said. That is part. There was a criteria. What are the criteria that to assess properties that are out there? That have potential to provide some open space or some recreational opportunities. That is this plan hopes to help set the stage for the town to do that process. That is a big undertaking to go through and to do all that research and to analyze and data and all that stuff. So that should be a goal. It is an objective to sort of understand what's available and to be ready if it is a property of interest, to be ready to if it's acquire or work with one of the partners, one of the land trusts or what have you that have the resources to, if it is acquire or to do a conservation restriction, which is the property maintains in private ownership, but it protects the development, keeps it, so there are different legal tools. But so it's just understanding what properties are of interest and what are the best tools for that. And so that is part of this plan. We're not going to list those properties. I don't know if those are sort of trying to keep track of those, but that should be something the town should be doing to keep track of that and to be nimble.
It would take the pressure off that center part of town to find those, if there are industrial areas that aren't, there's one building that's just not being used.
I mean, and to Andrew's point, industrial and commercial land, you want to be strategic with that because it brings in tax dollars, and so, but that is a different discussion, that is a different plan, so to speak. But it overlaps, it's one of those overlaps, because you do want conservation.
Well, and
So-
not to mention, there needs to be willingness on the part of the
Yeah,
private property
that's
owner
part of
to
what
sell
I'm
a
like-
property,
You have to communicate with the property owner, it's like a whole relationship, it's
Are there tax incentives in town for somebody who's got a property that's not being used to give it for open space to the town?
you can donate your land. I don't know what the,
I mean, it's a tax write-off if you donate it. I mean,
that is, some people do donate their properties. That is one way to acquire property is through donation, for sure.
In our area, I noticed there are properties that have been held for, complete wetland properties that have been held in a trust for 60, 70 years. And they're just, I don't even know if they know they own it. It's been there for so long and it's wetland, it's not buildable. And do you know that people?
So you're talking, so there's a land with wetlands and, it's not buildable, but it's been in a I'm just repeating what you said. So I think
There are trees, huge.
that's part of, adding it to the list for Amy and Justine and what they do every day is to track those properties, build relationships with an owner. If it is a property of interest, it's wetlands, there's a lot of value to that, to absorb floodwater, what have you, habitat, all of those things. But that is sort of that's building capacity for the town to do that and to track that. So it's one thing to say, yes, this is a great idea, we should do this. Another to also, like we were talking about field maintenance, to give capacity to also do that as well and to collect that data. But those are all great ideas. Like that's another, let's write that down if it's not clear on our board. But I do, we've talked for so long. I want to give everyone a chance to look at the material. I will say if you don't have enough time, there's a little index or business cards. You can look at this online. All of this is up there and you can give us your feedback and provide written comments as well if you would like. I don't mean to cut you short. I am available. You can still come up to me and we can still have a conversation. Absolutely. I think the battery's going on this one.
I just want to say thank you.
Yes, okay.
Thank you to everyone for coming out this evening, and thank you to our consultant, Krista, and her team, Horsley Witten, and our staff, Amy and Justine, for helping us move this plan forward. And I just, like Krista said, I encourage you to ask more questions, stick around, provide your feedback and input if you can. And I also have cards here. I'm happy to be a point of contact at the town if you need to reach out at any point.
Thank you so much. Thank you.